Good afternoon. Welcome, 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 welcome. So excited to have this time with you here today. My name is Janeen Williamson, and I'm Communications Manager here at All Aces Inc. And I'm excited to be hosting this conversation today. Would love to welcome our two panelists.
Thank you, Janine. Did you mean to mute yourself?
I did not.
Oh, okay.
Oh, technology. Welcome, Dr. Martin. Very excited to have the opportunity to chat with you today. Would love to just have a few moments to say hello. Uh, and also welcoming Jennifer Fortune, who is our Chief of Strategy and Project Management for All Aces. Hello.
Hi.
All right. Well, we have a lot to chat about today, so we are going to just dive straight into our topic.
Before you dive straight into the topic, I just want to check in and just do our quick um, touching base to see how we are today.
Oh,
That's one of our ways that we practice collective care in meetings as well as on Intentionally Act Live. So I just want to make sure that we just check in on each other. How are we doing for real, for real?
how are we doing for real, for real? I can kick us off. I'm okay. I am excited to be traveling back home later today. I've been away from my boys for a couple days, and so can't wait to give them hugs and kisses and just hear about how their time has been over the past weekend. How about you, Jennifer?
I am doing well today. I'm feeling overall well rested and um, approaching that time where I'll be ready for lunch. So, kind of in that in between space, but well overall.
Nice. Dr.
And
Martin?
I am, oh, thank you, Jennifer. I am doing very well today. I am excited about this conversation, and there's so much to dig into. So, but personally, I'm doing very well. Family is good, and I'm feeling pretty productive. So that always makes me happy.
Nice. Well, I'm glad we took this moment to check in and have an opportunity to share some of our values and what we do at All Aces. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on, too. So thank you, Dr. Martin, for that reminder at the top. All right. So our topic today is really taking it back to basics. What is DEI really? And we had a thought of the day that our team has been percolating on. And so we wanted to bring it to our audience as well. And so our thought today is yes, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but what does that really mean to people and organizations? We see this term everywhere. It's connected to social and racial justice. It's connected to anti-racism, LGBTQIA persons, conversations around Roe v. Wade, wokeness, liberals, the left, and even socialism. And so we wanted to really unpack this term. It means a lot to a lot of people and things. And we wanted to spend some time today just really peeling that onion back and also talking about why it is that at All Aces we say that we don't do traditional DEI work. And what does that mean for us? And why do we say it? So why don't we start by just kind of kicking that off and also acknowledging that yesterday was MLK Day, and it was an opportunity to, in the professional space, in the personal space, in the public space, to honor a great man, Martin Luther King Jr. and also to honor what he stood for. He had a commitment to action, and the show is called Intentionally Act. And so, as we are thinking about the conversation we're having today, we also want to remember and honor his legacy, and understand that his work provides us with an opportunity to be of service to others, and what that means to take action. And so, we'll be continuing to think about that as we unravel and unpack today. So I know that some people think that DEI is new, or some people, feel like that term may be new to them or to their organization. But where does it actually come from, and what exactly is DEI? And I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So yes, most people think that it's new. It's not. It's been around for decades. We've been talking about diversity in the context of workplaces for a while, and when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about representation, right? That we have representation in organizations that reflect the diversity of society. And when we see that there's not that representation, we know that there's something wrong, right? There's something broken with either the pipeline, with how people are recruiting people, a whole range of issues that contribute to when we don't see representation in organizations across a spectrum of identities. But we focus on racial justice, and so in confronting racism. So in this context, we're talking about BIPOC people, or Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So that said, diversity was the focus, but it doesn't necessarily lead to uh, BIPOC folks having better experiences in organizations. It just means that we're present.
Mm.
And then they said, well, we need inclusion. So we need to make sure that we include people in organizations. And it really became more about what researchers and nerds like me call interactional justice.
Mm.
About, well, how do you treat people? But it wasn't at an institutional level. It was more, in many instances, it was more about people's interpersonal experiences with other folks. And how do we make sure we're including people at that level? Then it became equity was added into the picture. And it was about, well, we also know that it's important not just to have representation, but we also need to have this inclusion piece about in terms of how people are part of the workforce or included into the activities of the workforce. But there's this whole other piece around resource distribution, and who gets access to what, and how do you track that. So those were kind of the three big areas that led to DEI. But then
Mm.
there's other things that have come along since then. And so we know that there has been a ton of work done around adding the J for Jedi. We've seen people do things like adding access and belonging, and so
Mm.
it's really this broad movement of DEI and then adding additional context, I think speaks to a larger issue of how do we better understand what justice really means and how it incorporates all of those concepts. Justice includes all of those concepts: representation, equity, in terms of procedural justice, in terms of distributional justice, inclusion in terms of interactional justice. And so, how do we make sure that we um, are thinking differently about not just the meaning of the word, but that this is a field of practice. And so, as a field of practice, there's the work that we do, and then the words that go along with it. Ultimately, the field of practice has to, I think, in order for us to be most effective, has to work in that justice piece, which is bigger picture and includes more than what we are currently talking about in the field.
That's really interesting. I love the way that you are calling out each individual word, and showing the context for the words and how they've evolved over time, It's not just, it was diversity, then it was D and I, then it was DE and I, and now there's these other forms of sharing those words. But it's the context and the meaning that I hear you explaining that really matters and makes a difference in what happens with the work. I also heard you talk about there's a difference between the words and kind of a distinction between that and the field itself. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. Much of the work that we do in organizations in order under this umbrella of diversity, equity, inclusion as a field, as a practice, um, it is really about improving the employee experience. It's about how do we make sure that employees are able to contribute meaningfully to the operations and culture of the organization. And how do we not just remove barriers, but build the kind of organizational structures and processes that facilitate the ability to thrive. And justice is a concept that is an umbrella concept associated with the field. And when you look at the research, not necessarily some of the ideas that people have come up with, but like the actual research in this field, which is a lot of a lot of social justice research in all different contexts, but in the context of organizational justice, there's a ton of research as well. And all of it points to that us as a field, as a practice, evolving to be able to have more of a process-based approach that brings people into the conversation. And we recognize that justice isn't a comfortable word for a lot of people because how it's been socialized in American mainstream conversations, in whether you're talking about the media or conversations with friends and family. So most people don't actually understand what it means in terms of those general conversations. But when it comes to the field of practice, it really presents us with the opportunity to be clear about what are the practices that we have, informal procedures and formal procedures. Where are there opportunities for us to have representation? And how can we be intentional about that? Where are the opportunities to make sure that people have access when they show up in the organization to all of the different opportunities available, including physical access for people with disabilities, physical disabilities. We also know that there's a whole piece around the ways that we are able to make sure there's quality. So it's not enough to say we're doing a bunch of DEI stuff, but if we don't give it the same amount of attention, time investment, we don't put resource investment in it, if we don't have people who have experience and are knowledgeable about this work, it will be missing quality and we will just be checking off a box just to be able to say we did something, but it won't have impact. And the other pieces are around distribution. Well, how do those resources that the organization has across the employee experience get distributed to the employees? How do promotions get distributed? How do development opportunities get distributed? How are we looking at people's performance and what are the differences there in how the data is showing patterns of potentially negative and positive experiences people are having associated with these very concrete parts of the organization. So it's an ongoing conversation, and we have to make sure that we are evolving the field as we're evolving our learning based on research and our experiences as documented and interrogated by research.
That's such a key point, bringing up that the idea that it's an ongoing conversation, right? So the words are changing, but the meaning of the work is also changing. And the things that you pointed to make the difference in whether the work is successful or not. And I know, here working with All Aces, we have these conversations all the time. And so just thinking about what we hear What is it that people think DEI work is, and what's actually missing in most organization strategies? And Jennifer, I know you are in our work every day with clients and have probably thought about this a lot. Would love to hear from you on that.
Yeah. Before I jump into that, I just want to point out everything that Dr. Martin shared. I'm sure folks are listening and saying, wow, that's a lot. And I just want to emphasize that it is a lot, you know? And so whether you are dedicated or committed to this work within your organization, your workplace, within your community, both within your own family, the reality is that this work is an investment of time, and that investment is long term, right? We often tell our clients there is no endpoint. This is an ongoing journey, whether we're talking on your personal journey or your professional journey. This is, or organizational journey. This is an ongoing journey, and I just really want to emphasize that for folks who are thinking about all the things that they can be doing in this work. Once you start, you are committing, hopefully, you are committing to the long term destination, right? And that destination being the space of justice that Dr. Martin just highlighted for us. And so, in regards to your question around what does this work look like, and what are
What do
our
people think?
clients coming to us? I I would say often when organizations are reaching out to us, for them, they either are at the very beginning of their journey, and so they perhaps have participated, facilitated within their organizations, one-time trainings, one-off trainings, like the unconscious bias trainings, and things of that sort, or like the basic equality versus equity 101 type of training.
Mhm.
However, they're in a space where they're desiring more, or have recognized the limitation of those one-off trainings. And it is in partnership with us that we support our clients in understanding that, again, tying to this long-term investment, that if you are on this journey, you need a strategy guiding your efforts. You need a strategy guiding your way. And that is what's often missing from organizations. There is no big picture strategy guiding their commitment on paper, the commitment that they've made to their employees, the commitment that they've made to the communities they serve, regarding advancing racial equity or social justice. There's no bigger, large picture strategy that their goals and their metrics are falling under. And so we have this experience where people can point to the one-off trainings, but they can't really point to the impact. Along with that, and you mentioned it earlier, Janeen, is this focus on doing things the right way, or showing up in the right way. And that often means, like, I'm saying, or I'm using the right words, I'm using the right language.
Yes.
I'm ensuring that on paper, my mission, our mission statement, is reflective of the social justice issues that we recognize within our field and want to address, or ensuring that maybe there is a DEI statement that's separate from our mission statement. Reads correctly, right? And so this heavy focus on words, again, keeps us away from really tangibly working towards impact, right? And truly ensuring that the experiences our employees are having, related to oppression of any type, particularly in our case, racism, as an organization that focuses on DEI through a racial justice lens, ensuring that those experiences are recognized and addressed appropriately. So yeah, I think overall, there's just this tick for tack type of approach, as opposed to a clear strategy and roadmap that gets to the process that Dr. Martin mentioned earlier.
I love that. I love the things that you're highlighting here and, showcasing that those one-off things aren't enough. And if you do say you're doing diversity work and you're kind of doing those one-off things, there are still so many other things that you can do to move further on your journey. Like you said in the beginning, you started out saying that this is a journey, right? And a journey is not one step. And so if you're doing those one-off things, or you're just talking about the words and you do the statement and you're like, okay, we're done. There's still so much more work to be had based on the values that you want to live as an organization. I'd love to hear any thoughts you have on that as well, Dr. Martin.
So first, I want to affirm everything Jennifer said around the importance of strategy in this long-term focus, this long-term process that's iterative. And one of the things, we had a meeting earlier and I brought up, it's like the difference between project management, which has a discernible start date, an end date, discrete set of tasks that get you to closing it out. And that's the mentality that people have when it comes to DEI work, especially from a leadership perspective. It's like, well, let's just get this thing done. Well, it doesn't work that way. It's more of a program management type of thing where it's long term. You're talking about a continuous improvement process that allows for you to take action, learn from it, go back to the research, see if there are other opportunities to improve based on what you experienced, work that in, and start the process over again. And that is that when we say process, that's what we're talking about. There will always be things to improve. There will always be things to add to the process, depending on what people's experiences are, which brings me to kind of my first point, is a lot of times with DEI, people forget or people focus too much on the counting of people. They focus on, well, how many Black people do I have? How many Latinx people do I have? How many, Asian people do we have? And how does that compare to how many white people we have? And that's important in terms of understanding representation. But I listed out a whole bunch of other things that go on beyond representation, right? So once you have diversity in the organization, what is their experience? And their experiences aren't just about them alone. It is about the environment that the organization creates that facilitates certain types of behavior. If I'm getting cues that certain behaviors are acceptable, then those are the types of things that I will feel okay doing and saying to people. If there are no repercussions, if there's no adjudication process or process to go to somebody who's going to not just listen and say, oh, so sorry to hear that, but is going to take some meaningful action to address the root cause of why I had that experience. And it's not just interpersonal. And that's sometimes where DEI falls down. So if I'm having an experience in an organization and my manager is constantly giving me performance reviews that aren't helpful, that say things like, you need to smile more, or, you're a little bit too aggressive. That's not performance feedback. That's feedback based on assumptions about who they think I am and therefore what they think they see. So that means that my managers aren't getting enough professional development to learn what it means to do real performance evaluations. That's the root problem, not, a problem between employees and things like that. And it could be, but what is it that the organization is facilitating that is creating that environment? And how do you address that issue? And so going deeper into experiences to understand that, why process is required. As you bring in new people, you'll have new dynamics. that will present different sets of benefits and challenges, and you'll have to figure out what is it that we need to adjust in order to address the challenges that have surfaced as we evolve as an organization. And then as we also think about the benefits of this work, oftentimes you'll hear people say, diverse organizations means more profits. That is not a causality type of relationship. Just because you have diversity doesn't mean somehow it's about just money.
Yeah.
Right? It means that there's something else going on there. The research doesn't say it's causal. There's a whole bunch of stuff in between and conditions that exist that allow an organization to actually benefit from having diversity, which is all of this stuff we're talking about, addressing the challenges, having meaningful structures and processes where people are respected, or that people can access, that are allowing them to move through the organization how they want to in terms of promotions and experiences, development opportunities. And all of this relates to employee retention, right? So I can have diversity in an organization and my numbers could look good, but is it the same people? Or is it a revolving door of diversity? People come in and they leave. Like, that's different, which means we have to have more sophisticated metrics to look at how we're doing with not just having representation, but how it connects to the employee experience and all of these different pieces of justice. And then the last thing I'll say is, in absence of this kind of intentionality, in absence of us being thoughtful, not just about who's in spaces, but how are we making sure that the spaces they're in facilitate their ability to thrive? And when we don't have that, we have a default culture, which in essence is on some spectrum of toxicity, because the default culture is a mainstream culture that oversimplifies everything, boxes people into categories, has challenges with seeing people's full potential. And therefore, you have a lot of people sitting in organizations who either are on their way out or they have quietly quit while still in their jobs.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. I remember, being in situations where I had performance reviews, and I was told I was too quiet. And then, you don't talk enough, Janeen, in meetings, instead of it being, like you said, like, let's figure out what we need to change in our culture, what we need to change in our processes and our policies to understand, like, this is not about Janeen being quiet. Like, how do we create a space where Janeen feels safe and comfortable to share, to speak up, to share her ideas? And that is not like managing someone out. That is changing what we do and how we work. And that is a very big difference, especially when you're talking about default culture and creating those toxic organizations or not doing the change to make it a different type of organization. And I know that in our work at All ACEs, we say that, we don't necessarily do traditional DEI work for our clients. And I think what you're talking about is a great example of how All ACEs is different. And so when you're kind of explaining to your family and friends what you do at All ACEs, how do you explain it to them? How do you make it so that people understand the work that we do and understand the uniqueness of it?
That's a question for me, right? For me, the simplest way of explaining the work that I do with Team All Aces, particularly to family, friends who are within my age bracket and in the social justice world, and familiar with certain terms, it's different. But, with family, I typically say I support organizations who are willing and ready to tackle their issues related to racism. And that is specifically because, as a first generation Caribbean Black woman, it is real easy to simply use the term racism and for folks to understand what that is, right? Globally, wherever you are from, you understand racism. You have experiences of racism. And so it's real easy for me to use that type of terminology versus getting into, I support organizations who desire to tackle their DEI issues, right? Because at the root of it, we are supporting organizations who recognize that there are systems of oppression at play, including racism, that are impacting all of their employees, but disproportionately impacting their BIPOC employees, right? Or disproportionately impacting the BIPOC communities that they serve, right? For us, who are used to this terminology, when we throw out, as Dr. Martin said, talked through earlier, when we throw out language like DEI work, we understand internally this is about our approach, right? This is about helping organizations tackle those issues related to racism and other interlocking systems of oppression through a DEI approach, right? So when organizations come to us, whether it's an employee who is reaching out to us in support of helping their leadership bring in a consultant, or it's a leadership team who is reaching out to us on behalf of employees who have demanded it, it is because there are experiences that have been called out as harmful, experiences that have been called out as toxic, that they're realizing that they need to do something about, or if they have attempted, they need to do better, right? And so for us, most of our work is reframing for our clients, modeling for our clients what this looks like in approach, right? So that mission you have on your website, what does it look like to really live this out in your approach? Dr. Martin, just mentioned this example of, diversity doesn't automatically equal more revenue, right? The approach behind that is, so what does the decision making look like within your organization, right? Are your decisions informed by all of the unique experiences that are within your organization? Are the people who are responsible for major decisions within your organization part of the leadership team that are held accountable to these decisions, right? What is the promotion process to ensure that your leadership team is reflective of the people who are mostly impacted by these decisions, right? So it's not this, again, tick for tack type of thing, but are we being holistic in our approach and our strategies to doing this work, right? And we understand internally as a team that we do not want to come into organizations and be that external consultant that holds the hands and does all the work and then leaves only to find out a year down the road that things are right back to where they were or not much progress was made, right? We understand internally as a team that we are dedicated to ensuring that our clients leave us with the knowledge, the skills, and the tools to carry this work on their own, right? And that is our role. Our role is to be the partners in this work to help them do that successfully. Not to take on the work ourselves. And so, in explaining to family and friends, I don't get into all of that. But big picture, I simply explain that, we're helping organizations who are truly committed to confronting racism and advancing racial equity.
Thank you. That makes it a lot easier to, to understand when you are sharing with people that might not be in the work. And I also love how you expressed what the non-traditional ways All Aces works with clients and the approach. I also heard a little bit about how, and especially now, I feel like we have been talking about diversity very much in the social sphere over the past 3 years, especially. And there comes a point where some clients come to us because they've hit that DEI wall. And so, Dr. Martin, I would love to hear, when we do have those clients that have hit the DEI wall, why have they hit it and what can they do about it?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think there's a broad range of reasons people hit that wall. There are some patterns though to the broad range of reasons. One is that they feel like they've been taking all of this action. All of this action is all these activities that they can point to, and to something Jennifer mentioned earlier. But there's no strategy. There are no plans to implement that strategy, and so in absence of those plans and strategies, it gets exhausting after a while just doing stuff. And then even if you don't have metrics, you can sense that you're not having the kind of traction that you're looking for, because people are still coming to you with issues. And so people start hitting that proverbial DEI wall, and they're tired. and they oftentimes, it's not ill will or intentional that they have hit the wall. They just don't realize that, yes, you might be exhausted, you might be tired, you may have quote unquote worked really hard, but you're not putting your energy, excuse me, in the right places. And so your work isn't translating into the kind of outcomes you're looking for. And so it still will be hard work, but you want to, if you're going to invest hard work, and you want to be getting good results and outcomes, to feed back into the process, into the cycle of improvement. I think the other thing is not using best practices. There's a lot of copying from other organizations and people. Like, we see something, it sounds good, it looks interesting, and so we're like, we're going to try that thing, without really critically analyzing, does that even work? All we heard is that people are doing it. We haven't heard if it actually works, or what people on the receiving end of it, the actual employees, how they experience it, or if they take it seriously. And so being able to really be thoughtful about why we're adopting certain approaches or practices in our organizations. Does it actually address an issue or issues that our employees have brought to us or are experiencing based on us looking at data? Because if it's not doing that, it's just something to write a press release about, to say that we're doing this thing, or something to send an email out to employees to say we're doing this thing. In many organizations, there will be the eye roll when people receive that kind of messaging, because they know what I'm dealing with every day is not going to change. And that's demoralizing for employees. And leadership, if their eyes are open, can sense that demoralization, even if they don't understand why. And so that's another way that a wall will get hit. And then the last thing I'll say is, people will have done a lot of trainings. So, a lot of times people have done a bunch of random activities. But we've also seen a lot of organizations who are like, we're going to train our way out of this. And I just want to be super clear that trainings are a part of a larger strategy that has clear objectives or goals that we are trying to accomplish, and issues we're trying to address. So if we go back to the example that we were using around, I'm getting feedback on my performance review from my supervisor that's not helpful, then in being able to see that connects to this larger issue of professional development for managers, then I can't just train my way out of that. I can't just train the managers. There has to be a system of accountability put in place. Well, are they applying the training to the work? Was the training even any good so that they could apply it to their work? Are we able to, how does it fit into our plans and the issues we're trying to address? How does that training fit into a larger plan of making sure there's resources invested in whatever changes that need to be made in addition to training, right? And so it could be, you might have to revamp your whole performance management process because it's just not working. And a lot of the research shows that most of the traditional ways that we approach performance management are actually not helping people to be successful in their jobs. And the main reasons are, number one, they don't happen often enough to be helpful. Number two, the folks doing the reviews aren't properly trained, so you get that situation we talked about earlier. And number three, um, they're designed in a way that are oftentimes not based on quantitative and qualitative data, right? Sometimes it's based on data, numbers, right? Hard, cold numbers, but it's not based on context of what was happening in those different moments throughout the cycle of that performance review, to really understand what was happening, right? The numbers don't tell the story, they just tell what. You don't know how or why or anything else. And so really being able to have more capabilities building, where we have the plans, organizational structures, the resources, the training, the evaluation, or exercising process to kind of test out things. If we're not doing that and we're just doing training, we don't really have a capability. We just have some more knowledge. Knowledge is great, but knowledge isn't the only part of action that we need to take in order to make progress.
I love that. It's
Can I
so
mention
important. Yeah, go for it, Jen.
two things I want to not expand on? Dr. Martin shared marvelously, but just also mention the point around organizations deciding to do things simply because they are seeing other organizations doing it and not really taking stock of its relevancy to them. I am noting that with, particularly in the past couple of years, as you mentioned earlier, Janeen, with folks putting out like press releases on what they're doing, and a lot of these efforts being external to their organization, folks are jumping on board because nationally this is what folks are demanding, right? And that's great and dandy and all, but we are falling short because we're jumping to what our organization can do externally and skipping over what our organization can be doing internally. And I do understand that, particularly in organizations that are serving the community, right, around them, that provide services and are in that sphere. I understand the demand from even employees that the organization do better by the people that they're serving. I understand that. However, I just want to emphasize that when we do take care of our home, our internal first before jumping to the external, there is a ripple effect, right? And so part of the strategy is being clear about how this effort impacts our employees, and then how there will eventually be a consequential impact externally, right? So if there's a change in our operations internally, it will by default impact our external impact, because the internal is guiding how, again, our approach, how we are doing things, how we are deciding to do things, right? And so that inevitably will impact our communities. And so I just want to emphasize, particularly for those who are just starting on this journey, who may be looking for external support through consultants and other vendors, to really be mindful of the importance of starting with your own home, starting internally, and noting that there will be a ripple effect. And I've seen even our clients decide to start with the internal strategy, and then a couple years later to be more intentional about their external strategy, which I really do appreciate. And that is what employees want to know from the beginning, is that, again, connecting this to a long-term vision. Okay, we're focusing on this for the next 3 to 5 years, and then we're going to focus on this, right? Employees want to see that you have it down on paper, you are committing to it, and there will be measures of progress along the way. The other piece I wanted to add was related to trainings. This point around building capabilities, Dr. Martin always tells us internally as a team, and I know folks have probably heard it here for those who view and listen to and Textually Act Live, like this work makes us better people, right? Better human beings. And so this building of capabilities, oftentimes it seems like our clients are, when we are thinking about or proposing learning experiences that build knowledge and skills, like it seems oftentimes that they are looking for something specific that is related to DEI and nothing else. But the truth of the matter is, when we are building skills like critical thinking, how we communicate, how we internally communicate with ourselves, building self-awareness, building our emotional self, right? All of the skills we talk about, like those skills, although they seem like not related to DEI work and not really something that will impact how we are able to our success in this work. The truth of the matter is it will, right? This works makes us better humans. This work this when we are diligent about working on these skills, we are better capable, better able to address these issues as they come up. Because all of these issues, like even if we think back to the feedback performance review example, like all of these issues, they are, although they seem like they're not about tackling racism or tackling any other system of oppression, they are, right? Because
Yeah.
justice is about making this space, this world that we live, work, and play in better for all of us. And so this is how we get at justice, right? Yes, I just want to emphasize, or demystify this idea that there's something like unique about how to go about this work that is disconnected from showing up as a better human.
That is so important. The humanity in this process. Like we don't live in a homogenous bubble. We are connected and we are working with people. And if we are bringing in people from different backgrounds, different races, and we are, working towards that diversity, then how we approach each other and how we do the work really matters, and how we connect to that humanity. So thank you for bringing that point up. Also, I love what you said about starting at home. I know at All Aces, we are, one of our core values is to practice what we preach. And so, are there ways that you can share? We did at the top of the show our collective care. Thank you, Dr. Martin, for reminding me of that. But there are things that we do every day inside of our own processes, policies, and culture that are focused on eliminating racism and working towards those things within our own culture. So I'd love to hear any other examples that come up in our own organization that we can share with others.
Yeah, one of the ways that I really appreciate about our team, again, going back to this anchoring ourselves in our true humanity, I see it in all of us, team members, including leadership, really leaning into those moments where we fault, where we make mistakes, or missteps happen, and leaning into our humanity, being humble enough to, one, acknowledge when things have not gone the way we expected or the way we intended, and really being intentional about asking others around us, what does it look like to repair the harm that has happened, right? Or how can we collaboratively repair the harm that has happened? And I I think it takes, again, going back to our basic skills, it takes a whole lot of self-awareness to do that. It takes the ability to self-manage and be honest in those moments and transparent in those moments. It takes effective communication skills to even be able to effectively communicate what has happened and how it happened, right? So again, leaning into those basic skills that make us better humans and support our ability to do this work well. And of course, all of this anchors us in this value of collective care that is, the one value that runs through all of our values. So yeah, I think that is one example of how we practice what we preach and show up in this work internally for ourselves. And also with our clients too. We do this with our clients as well, whether it's something like not being able to meet a deadline, or, not meeting expectations as desired for a particular service as well.
Thank you. Anything to add to that, Dr. Martin?
I would just say that in terms of our internal work and how it relates to the work we do with clients, that one thing we've talked a lot about, talked about two big buckets of activities or work that needs to be baked into process and strategy. And I just want to be explicit about it. One is what Jennifer amplified, which is the what we call the diversity, inclusion, and equity transformation. Part of that is the knowledge and skills. So that's my individual responsibility, and it overlaps with the organizational responsibility of making sure that I have the knowledge and skills to be able to do the thing the organization is asking me to do. And it's oftentimes a missing piece. We want to just jump to justice. We're like, okay, everyone's just going to do this.
Yeah.
But people don't always know what it means to do it. And I don't mean a generic training. I mean, how does this apply to what we're doing in our organization? What is it that we need to change about our process? And if we decide to make this change, how are we helping employees to be a part of that change? Not both in terms of being a part of the decision-making process of how that change happens, and being a part of making the change happen. And I think it gets back to the importance of process. It gets back to the importance of bringing people into decision making as often and as many times as possible, because that's where you're going to get the best information, the best intelligence, the best context. So in absence of context from the people closest to the work, we're probably making decisions that are not good for people. And that probably won't work. And if we don't have a healthy environment, people will not tell us the things that they see with their own eyes that are obvious to them that this isn't going to work, or why this isn't going to work. So I just wanted to lift that up as a part of this conversation as we start to wind down.
Let me just add to that. I love that you ended on this point of understanding the context of the experiences people are having, right? And so when I think of our services, particularly for our clients who are at the very beginning of their journey, one of the ways we support folks before we even get to the training, the learning experiences to build capabilities, we start with assessments, right? We start with organizational assessments that help us understand not only what work has been done related to racial equity or social justice in the past, but what are the experiences people are having? What are the operations that are impacting how people are able to do their work and accomplish their work on a daily basis, right? And being the external partner to facilitate those type of organizational assessments. We've received the feedback from our clients that it is helpful, right? Folks are we're able to build that rapport with employees, and we're able to gather the data that organizations, particularly leaders, need when it's time to draft that strategy, right? You cannot draft that strategy without it being informed by data. And so we're able to do that, of course, along with then recommending the trainings and the learning experiences that are informed by that organizational assessment, and provide people with context on why it is you are sitting through a training around building emotional intelligence, why it is you are sitting through or engaging, right? Because it's not one way, but you're engaging in a learning experience related to building your communication skills, right? So the services we provide, the things that we're emphasizing here, our services very much align with the reality that supports that.
I appreciate that, and kind of connecting all of the dots to, we do offer training, but we first offer the assessment. We first hear from the employees. We first understand the employee experience, and then we work on a plan, and part of that plan includes training. So I feel like that's a big distinction from what other consultants might do, or what trainers, like you said, maybe someone just comes in and they're training and it's not even a good training. But if we have that start in the beginning with the assessment and the focus groups and understanding the employee experience, it really changes what can happen after we leave. It gives an approach that they're able to actually build those capabilities that you mentioned earlier, Dr. Martin, and that they're able to continue on the journey. And that's a very different approach than a lot of other consultants or other organizations that are out there doing this work do. It's the T in our diet framework. It's the transformation part. And it's been so helpful to hear how all of those pieces come together, and where we started from in the beginning, and understanding that history. So since we only have a couple minutes left, I just wanted to see if you have final thoughts that you would like to share with people as we're closing out our conversation today on what DEI actually is. Is there something that you would like to leave as a takeaway, that someone who is trying to start this work at the beginning of their journey might be able to take away from this? Or is there something you'd like to leave for someone that's already in this work and has been doing it for years? What's a final thought?
Final thought from me would be to always listen to the employees. It doesn't matter what your identity is and what kind of oppression that you have experienced. Everyone, there's a pattern of experiences that you need to understand specific to the organization. And when you are in that space, it's easy because we have so much study, we've read about this stuff, we've done this work, and potentially in other contexts, easy to forget that other folks are not immersed in this all the time. It's easy to forget other people's humanity when we're so tired of kind of experiencing certain things or having certain conversations, having to explain certain things to people. It gets tiring and exhausting.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that the conversations that we're having, if they are intentional, they're structured, they're part of a bigger picture strategy, are meant to inform the work that we do moving forward. But it has to be informed by people in the organizations, everyone in the organization. So I know you've been talking about racial justice, and it's important that as we're striving for justice, that we're not leveraging um, tactics that feel oppressive to folks, because then we can't get to justice.
Mm.
Um, the we oftentimes think that people who, when we're doing this work, that it's only about, in this context of racism, that it's only about BIPOC people or people of color. And when in reality, it's just a signal. It's a red flag that there's something broken in that, in some part of the employee experience that we need to go and fix, that's impacting white people too. It's worse for us though because of racism and because we're easy targets. But there's a pattern there that leads us to a clear direction, pathway forward. So don't be discouraged by the repetitiveness sometimes. And remember people's humanity. Most people want to do the right thing. Most people want to
Mm.
move work forward. And sometimes that is challenging and people will push back. But stay in it, stay in the conversation, because it will help you understand where there are these patterns that are disproportionately burdening people of color, but also they're problematic for white people too. But the pattern is going to be worse for people of color. And Jennifer's back, so I'll pass it to her to close us out.
Any final thoughts, Jennifer? One thing you'd like to leave our audience with? Anyone that's in the journey at the beginning, or even if they've been doing this for years, what's one last takeaway?
I mean, I think I'll land with the way I started. Yes, this work is a lot. Yes, it does require an investment of time, commitment, and love, truly. But it's feasible, right? It's
Mm.
tangible, it's possible. And I think everything that we talked about is what makes it that. Um, you know, strategy, process, intention, data, like all of these things make it feasible and possible. And so I hope more than anything, folks are leaving this conversation more hopeful, that they can take on this work and make an impact and make a difference. Or if they've been doing this work for a while and they're hitting walls, that there's ways to blow through those walls. So yeah, be hopeful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you both for having this conversation with me today. I'm so grateful. If you are watching and you would like to have some support in this process, as Jennifer just said, it can be hard, but we are here to help you and support you. Reach out to us at info@allacesinc.com. You can also visit our website at allacesinc.com. We would love to hear from you. Keep watching our show. Come back next time and be a part of our audience and invite a friend. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Take care, everyone.